Welcome to all of you zooming in from California, New York, and other parts of the world. Welcome you to Women Eco Artist Dialogue special panel on part of the exhibition Kinship with Birds in Flight and Plight. Artists and scientists winging it together, strategizing for avian conservation. And this talk is sponsored by Weed, which is a volunteer-run collective of female-identified visual artists, writers, curators, art historians, researchers, scientists, and others interested in highlighting the intersection of art and ecological issues. I'm Mary White, one of the co-chairs, joined by board members Christina Bertia, who helped organize this event, and moderator Lauren Elder. We'll start with a land acknowledgement. If you wish, please type your location and in the chat. Weed's office sits on the territory of the Huichen, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chichoneo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the sovereign Verona tribe of Alameda County, the largest shell mounds in the Bay Area. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Buiwak Ohlone tribe and other familiar descendants of the Verona band. We recognize the Muimakma Ohlone tribe, who are campaigning to become federally recognized, the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone, who are researching and revitalizing and preserving Ramaytush Ohlone history and culture, and the Confederated Villages of Lejeune and the Segorite Land Trust, who are working to return native land back to Indigenous stewardship. At this point, I will introduce Lauren Elder, who will tell you a little bit more about our exhibit, and which will be continuing till the end of February. And then she will be introducing our speakers. And Lauren Elder is a environmental artist and board member and head and part of the exhibition committee. And after several years of studio, she has happily returned to working in field work, collaborating with schools and community groups to create sustainable green space for their everyday lives. These projects are all cited in Mexico, with 2 new introductions next month in Tecate at the Mexico border.
And can you please admit 4 people? I'm not being able to admit them, and Lauren is probably one of them.
All right. Let's see. Let's see. Jane, could you admit a few people? You're a co-host. Everybody getting admitted.
We've lost Lauren.
We've lost Lauren.
Yeah.
Okay.
She is good.
Lauren was admitted.
Okay, Lauren, you've been introduced. Time to start. Only you're muted, my dear. You're muted.
How's that?
There we go.
Hey, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you're all here. I'm so glad I'm here too, finally. That was a funny little detour. Big thanks to everybody for taking time out of your precious Sunday afternoon and joining with us. I'm sure this is going to be incredibly inspiring, not only for the audience, but for you all seeing each other's work. This is the 4th and final presentation connected with our online exhibition, Kinships with Bird in Flight and Plight. And this is scientists and artists together winging it. And we're going to be looking at your strategies for engaging the public in this incredibly critical issue of conservation of birds. So We're going to get rolling. I'll introduce, you're here as a group. Each one of you is an amazingly distinct individual with your own media and strategies. And I'm going to introduce you individually as you have a turn to speak. So we're going to begin with Jane Kim, who was our curator for the show and has attended some of our other artist presentations that have been recorded. Jane received a BFA degree from Rhode Island School of Design and a master's certificate in science illustration. She's created large-scale public art across the entire country, and notably the Wall of Birds at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and has produced works for other significant institutions like the National Aquarium. And now she's working with the Sempervirens Foundation, we just found out. So go, Jane.
Thank you, Lauren. Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us. And I just wanted to mention how much I love the title, Winging It, because, you know, really that's kind of all of us ever really do. And the one life that we get is how do we get through it? And it does sort of, no matter how hard we plan, it just sometimes all still feels like we're all just winging it as we go. So birds in plight and flight. I was so moved to be able to jury this exhibit for you all. Thank you so much for the invitation. I think one of the things that was most exciting was getting to hear about all the different stories that was brought to us. And that for me is, I think, one of the most significant roles as an artist is to leave stories behind for others to read, to learn, to observe, to walk away with, and to retell, and to continue that conversation, so on and so forth. So today I'm going to show you, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm somehow not at the beginning of my presentation here. It was all just working so seamlessly before. There we go. All right. Inktwell, here we are. So Inktwell is the name of my studio. I'm located in Half Moon Bay, California. And, you know, we sort of focus on all things art, wonder, and the natural world. And in fact, I sort of think of what I do as operating in the spaces in between art, artifact, science illustration, and design. And I never really feel like the work ever just fits into one category. And you know, I do a lot of work with birds, but really it's about the entire planet and the ecosystems that, you know, we rely on in order for our species to survive and thrive. So I'm going to focus on the bird heavy work today for today's purposes, but this was probably one of the most foundational projects that I think describe our studio. This is the Wall of Birds at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It was a 2.5-year project that I spent 17 months on site painting. All the birds are painted life-size on a world map, and they represent, at least in the year of 2015, the different families of birds that were described at that time. And the ones that are in color are alive, and the birds that are in grayscale are extinct and or represent the ancestors of birds up the stairwell. So this next slide here, I'm going to take you to an online interactive in case any of you are interested in visiting the Wall of Birds without having to go to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. You can absolutely do that by looking up the Wall of Birds interactive, and this will come up in a Google search. And you click anywhere to begin. And it's like Google Maps for the mural. So you can basically zoom in to way closer to these paintings than I ever thought was going to be possible. And then each bird is hyperlinked. And you can read, sorry, I'm just moving my columns around. You can read a bit about on the species level, about the family that they belong to. You can even listen to sound recordings of the bird, if they have them. The Macaulay Library is the largest natural sound collection in the world. So they often have a lot of these animals. And then you can also see where they have the data has been input into eBird, which is a basically a citizen science tool for birders. So this is I start with this because I do feel like as a representation of the studio and what it stands for, this really does kind of do it all in the sense that it combines the art, it combines the science, it combines interpretation, but also walking away with real information. And we actually also have a book out. It's called The Wall of Birds, One Planet, 243 Families, 375 years. And you are more than welcome to pick up a copy of this, but it kind of walks you through not only my process of painting, but certain connections to the birds, because after all, I think that the natural world is really just a place for us to learn about ourselves. And so that's really largely what this book is about. And then to continue, because I really firmly believe that all of art's life doesn't end with the finished painting, I think, or the finished piece. There's so much opportunity to continue to springboard off of the work and to create new collaborations and interesting projects with other groups. And so we actually partnered with this sneaker shoe company called Lehman Doer, and we created the 4-step mating dance of the blue-footed booby. And so each side of the shoe has a unique image on it, and it actually shows the full sequence of the blue-footed boobies dance. And that was on the blue-footed booby was one of the birds that was on this mural. So now I'm going to kind of walk you through different parts of my practice, which, it's always really hard to in an elevator pitch describe what I do here at Inkwell, because it ranges anywhere from really straightforward scientific illustrations for magazines and papers to fine artwork, standalone paintings, exhibits, museums, interpretation for natural history museums, signage, outdoors, and trails. So the gamut of work is really just so broad, but what connects it all is stories about the natural world and celebrating those stories. So this is called The Innovators. This was when I was a artist in residence at the De Young. I worked on all work surrounding the native, non-native tension that really is Golden Gate Park and the man-madeness of Golden Gate Park. And so this is a pair of ravens making a nest in a non-native tree, and it's woven with apple chargers and lightning cables. And so this was really during a time when San Francisco, I think, was shaken by the tech tension, the tech industry revitalization tension. So that was really a response to that. This piece was created for the Leake Woodson Art Museum. And so for you bird artists out there, there's an annual exhibit called Birds and Art, and it's been going on now for 40-something years. And they have an annual show of artists, international artists from all over, submitting works that focus around birds. So I was there as a resident for 2 weeks and created this piece called RG Bird. And it's about the color blue, and that it doesn't exist as a pigment in the avian world. It only exists as a structural color, and it's about our perception of the blue. So when we see this bird, there's no way to say it's this color. And so the shadows are about the level of light. So you see that the shadow cast has their different tones. So the lighter the shadow suggests the lighter the light. And so then you're getting this this range of blues on this one indigo bunting. This piece was called Cornerstones, and this was part of Birds and Art at the Leake Woodson Art Museum in 2019's exhibit. This is called Cornerstones, and we think of birds as being indicator species, and so as cornerstones, I kind of placed a bird-plant relationship in each one of those corners to just highlight a healthy ecosystem and how they might be paired. This piece is called Seafood Medley. I was inspired by just kind of laughing at a bag of seafood medley in our freezer. And this was a show that I created that was around our really lost connection to nature through our food, and how we have become so estranged from our understanding of our food sources. And thinking back, in the Neolithic period of humanity, thinking about tool making and watching and observing birds and how and what they ate. And, especially the oyster catcher, our oyster shuckers are pretty much exactly the same shape as an oyster catcher's bill, and the talons of an osprey. And so this piece was inspired by that. This piece is called All Black Everything, or The Artifice of Value. It's about our egg poaching history and really how we place value and what we place value on. And so we've got this Fabergé egg with a little rooster. This one sold in auction. It brought in like the highest price for a Fabergé egg at that time, and had that little rooster come out and crow at every hour. And so this piece is, it was inspired by that. But this is really just to show you in the ways that I like to use the natural world and birds especially to create allegory for things beyond just nature, but how we understand ourselves in the context of the natural world. This piece is called Soundings. Soundings is also another word for measuring water depth, but it also happens to be about a bird that I think has one of the most extraordinary calls of all birds that exist today. So this is the common loon, and this is just an image of their sound wave as a call, which is, what the backdrop was inspired by. Okay, so then I'm I have one more set of paintings. This one is called Seven Starlings. This is about the movement of murmuration and how one bird tracks the nearest seven to stay in that formation. And so this was one that was done with this other pair. So this one's called 1,365 starlings. That's how many starlings there are in this painting, and it's a number divisible by 7. Here's a few. This is the painting for scale, and me, I was just kind of picking out hairs after I varnished the painting. But here's some close-ups. So just quickly go through these. Okay, and this piece was for a show that was about window strikes. And so I felt like the kaleidoscope was a beautiful way to talk about the fracturing, of their ability to move through air like they used to with all of our buildings. And so the ruby-throated hummingbird is one that is often suffers these window strikes. And this dot pattern on the outside of the kaleidoscope was to just give you a easy solution for your windows. These dot patterns spaced at every 2 inches on your window will help birds see the glass. Okay, so now I'm going to move into my public artworks, because I don't know if you noticed on some of the labels for the paintings, it's private collection, private collection, private collection. So there was this element about the art world and art making sharing process that I became a bit frustrated with, because there wasn't a way to really engage the general public. And so these public murals and works that are outside and for the public are spaces in which I'm most happy to operate in, because it is a gift to anybody who stumbles upon it and becomes a part of the fabric and the ecosystem of the urban ecosystem that people are traversing. And so this is in Houston, Texas. It's, as if you're into birds, it's just an absolute flyway, spectacular for migrating birds. And so what we did here is the backdrop is like the Rorschach image of the bayou itself. So this is where the confluence of Buffalo Bayou and I think it was White Oak Bayou meet in Houston. And on one side, I have migrating birds in their breeding plumage. And then on the right-hand side, birds in their non-breeding plumage. And on the either end, we've got birds that nest in the winter that are there nesting in the wintertime, and ones that are nesting during the summertime. So it kind of tells the full seasonal story of birds that you might be able to observe if you're in Houston at any given time of year. So these are just a couple of close-up images. There's me for scale. There's that ruby-throated hummingbird. And then all of our public art murals also come with an interpretive signage that is placed with that mural so people can learn what the mural is about, and our partners and the agenda that we're sharing with the world. This is at the Moore Lab of Zoology down at Occidental College in Los Angeles. They recently renovated their science wing, and we got to create murals about the work that they do there at their lab. Again, some more close-ups.
Jane, we need to move along.
Okay. There we go. And then this is called a hawk flies high. And then finally, something to look forward to this year. This mural is actually going to be installed in Philadelphia. I was part of their artist in residence program for their Avian artist in residence program at the Academy of Natural Sciences. They had this show throughout the summer called Illuminating Birds, and it was a history of ornithological illustration. So that's my work in a nutshell about birds and what I do with my practice.
Wow. That was just stunning. Absolutely stunning. You must be so proud of the work your studio is doing and its impact. And one thing that struck me, and I won't dwell on it because this isn't the time for comments, but it was the complete fusion of the science ideas and the art execution. It was seamless.
Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate that.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Ryan, and I'm going to do a little intro for him. He grew up in Mono Lake, and it has made it his life's work to research and protect the birds that depend on the lake. He studied seabird ecology and collaborates with artists and scientists to create innovative solutions for seabird habitat, restoration, and conservation. As science director for the Oikonos Ecosystem Knowledge, he has worked at Owens Lake, Mono Lake, the Great Salt Lake, and in Chile. Ryan also teaches the natural history of birds at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And I knew of his work through a project that he did with one of the instructors at California College of the Arts. When I was there, we were both working with the social impact program. So I was aware of this really brilliant idea. Okay, Ryan.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks, Jane, for that super cool presentation you just gave. I see a lot of overlaps already. It's fun to be here because I identify mainly as a scientist, but I work for this nonprofit organization, Oikonos, that has a really fun component and a really meaningful component of our work that is in our mission, it's to combine art and science and design and community work to achieve changes for wildlife, to support wildlife habitat and support ecosystems. So we have had the opportunities to do some really cool stuff. I'll interpret this picture a little bit for you. We're out on Año Nuevo Island near the Bay Area, where we have these really cool birds called auklets that are relatives of the puffins that are better known. They live in underground burrows where they make their nests. So they dig a hole in the ground like a gopher. And what we're looking at here is a ceramic nest, which is what was alluded to in the intro there. A ceramic nest that mimics their natural burrow. My friend Emily here is holding a Cassin's auklet chick, the little cutie in her hands. And we worked with designers at California College of the Arts, ceramicists and artists to make these nest boxes basically that are able to be walked over by a sea lion. We have tons of marine mammals out there, and they can jump up and down on them and sleep on them and not crush the little chicks that are in there. And then it also helps with erosion. And another really cool development with this is we're able to use this design to make climate adaptive nests that stay cooler than other artificial nest boxes. And artificial nest boxes are used a lot for seabirds to give them more habitat and to also help us research them. So we're also putting these out on the Farallon Islands. And this isn't going to be the main focus of my talk, but it's just too cool of a project to not mention, because the birds are actually living in the art, and that's one of the coolest things about it. It's creating literal habitat. This is a picture on the left of a rhinoceros auklet. You can see its little rhino horn on the adult's bill, and there's a little chick head sticking out on the left. That's actually inside. This is like a lid has been opened, and you're looking inside the nest. And then on the right, there's some nests. That's kind of what the Cassin's auklet version looks like out on Nuevo Island, those ceramic ones. So that's been a really successful project. The population of the auklets out on Año Nuevo has more than doubled since we started doing habitat restoration, including the nests out there. They're replacing all the nest boxes on the Farallon Islands for the Cassin's auklets with these climate adaptive ceramic ones, and it's been really rewarding to work with the ceramicists at California College of the Arts, and we've done classes with them where they've helped us develop these designs. But I'm going to tell you more about this more current project. Well, that's ongoing, and it's been applied to a lot of different islands. It's now in Hawaii and Southern California, those seabird boxes. But I'm going to talk about the work I've been doing recently on phalaropes, which is a maybe lesser known bird. It's a little shorebird that likes to swim a lot, and they're the ones in the background of my screen there behind me too, swimming. This is what they look like in the hand. They're pretty small, and they're specialists on saline lakes. And when I say saline lake, that is a lake that is really salty. And maybe you've heard of Great Salt Lake or Mono Lake in California. Here's a map that shows some of them and the breeding range, or the life cycle range of the Wilson's phalarope, which is the birds behind me. And so they're breeding up in North America. They go down to South America. And a lot of migratory birds have these really inspirational connections, and this is one of them, and especially for saline lakes, because these birds, they're relying on saline lakes like Mono Lake and Great Salt Lake to eat in North America. They stop and they double their body weight from like 1 AA battery to 2 AA batteries while they're there for only like 6 weeks. And then they fly all the way to South America where they go to these other saline lakes. And a really important point is that saline lakes are really, really threatened. They're one of the most threatened ecosystems on Earth. They're as threatened as the polar ecosystem or these other ecosystems that you've maybe heard more about. And what's happening is they're just drying up because there are these fragile water balances, and we're extracting the water before it gets there from like the rivers that are going in to use for agriculture and things like that. So here's one example of Lake Abert in Oregon, which these birds rely on, dried up in 2015. It's come back and dried up again and come back, but it's on a bad trajectory. Maybe you've heard of Great Salt Lake and its problems. If you haven't, Google it and read the news about how Great Salt Lake is in trouble. So that's a worrisome thing that's happening, and the birds are connecting these lakes for us as a hemispheric network better than any other thing. And the lake that I have been connecting with folks in Argentina with is called Laguna Marchiquita, and 500,000 phalaropes can be there all at once, and it's about half their world population. It's a huge lake that is as big as Great Salt Lake, the biggest lake in the Americas now, and located in central Argentina. This is what it looks like from a plane. It really does look like a little sea as the Spanish translation. It's also a big flamingo place. And this is a long story that I'm really condensing, but we really developed this sister lake connection between these areas that we call a sister lake between Mono Lake and Great Salt Lake and Laguna Marchiquita. This is a meeting that we had at Mono Lake with a bunch of folks from South America, and to really try to like grapple with how do we solve these problems and we're all connected because of this bird. It is a really good symbol of it. One of the things we've done is like Marcela Castellino, who's here in this picture, grew up at Laguna Marchiquita in Argentina and now studies phalaropes and is trying to save her lake. And here I am at Mono Lake where I grew up studying phalaropes, and we're doing surveys together, and we're having interchanges of researchers. And then to get to the art component, this is a mural that is a public art piece that was made last year down in the town next to Laguna Mar Chiquita by the artist Vato Servato, or his nickname is Vato. And this is a delegation of folks from Mono Lake that are in front of it, and gives you a better overview of it. It's making this point about the different spots in red there that are the saline lakes, and then highlighting the bird coming down to the end of its journey at Laguna Mar Chiquita. This is right next to the shore of Laguna Mar Chiquita, right in the main town that abuts the lake. And then this is a bunch of locals coming out and celebrating this new mural with a bunch of people from Mono Lake. So the next cool thing that happened is that after the Mono Lake delegation went down there and they saw this mural, they actually surprised us with this mural. They didn't know it was going to be there. And we got to the town and there was this beautiful mural. We decided we had to bring Vato up to California to continue painting more murals. And we actually made it happen through Iconos and other orgs, the Mono Lake Committee, to bring Vato to California, where he came last summer and he painted 3 Falero murals in Lee Vining, and he painted, which is next to Mono Lake, and he also went to Great Salt Lake and painted murals there. He painted like 6 murals in Lee Vining, and about other things, people kept on hiring him for more stuff. So this is one of the Falero murals that is in Lee Vining, which is the very small town next to Mono Lake. And this is probably the biggest one that is right along the highway as you're driving through town. The front of the Mono Lake Committee, which is a local nonprofit there, he painted the storefront with some Falero murals that it is in progress and finished. And then afterward, he went on to go paint a nature center at Great Salt Lake, because we wanted it to be connecting all the different sister lakes. And so he made a lot of news. These are some pictures I took out of the news, again, painting that connection of the continent and the birds migrating. And you can check him out at Vato Servato on social media. And, I was interested to hear the previous presentation, because really what we're trying to go for with the art and the science combos here is to like take a problem and try to promote it and to spread the word. In this case, I'm really on the feeling that these salt lakes, it's really a crisis that's happening and people need to know. And I think, people down in Mar Chiquita did not know about Mono Lake, and people in Mono Lake did not know about Mar Chiquita. So that is a very direct, we are trying to get the communities connected, and having a beautiful piece of public art is really an inspirational way to do that. People can really rally around, much more so than me going there as a scientist and saying, oh, the birds go back and forth and let me, we're getting maps of their tracks and things like that are also great, but they're really getting something that's so tangible to people is really one of the solutions. So with the big picture on what's going on with these saline lakes, what can we do? I've been really promoting the message that, yes, the phalaropes are connecting us, they're linking us as people and communities across the hemisphere. And a big takeaway from my experiences, I grew up in Mono Lake and have long known about the conservation story there, but we will lose the phalaropes at our lake if we don't think about the conservation needs throughout the whole hemisphere. And that's really the take-home point, is that we have to save Mono Lake. Maybe you've heard that slogan, we have to save Mono Lake, and we did, and we need to keep saving Mono Lake, but we also need to save Laguna Mar Chiquita and Great Salt Lake. And we need to use all the tools we have. I've been doing a lot of science, but we also need to be using art and connecting our communities. And the good news is we've been doing a lot of that, and the communities have really developed strong connections, and good progress is being made, even though there's some dire situations out there. So that is the most recent example of the art and science combinations that we've been doing at Oikonos, and I'm going to try to stay in time, so I'll just call it good there. Thanks.
Wow. Wow, I'm bowled over once again. It's just beautiful work. I remember that, oh, I'm not supposed to be having a comment. I remember the battle for Mono Lake. We can talk about that later. It was a long drawn out political battle with the city of LA. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Maya and give her her time. Maya is also a multidisciplinary person, and I'm just so delighted to be with you people who are mixing it up. It's to me the richest ground. Maya is a wildlife biologist, a poet, and a filmmaker. She goes from the page to the screen and out to the woods. She advocates for leaving natural forests standing after they have been burned in order to welcome in an abundance of wildlife, especially birds. In her own words, because fire is feared and much misunderstood, forests are clear-cut or heavily logged after wildfire. But post-fire forests of the American West are among our richest and most biologically diverse, and they are left undisturbed. Somebody has sound on. Okay. Her work takes her to wilderness areas, and as I said previously, to the page and the screen. So let's see what she has to share with us today.
Thank you so much. Just so delighted to be here with my colleagues from Inkwell and Oikonos. My goodness, incredibly inspirational, so much in common. I'm going to try to share the screen as well so that I, let's see, select a PowerPoint. Let's see, slideshow. Can you see the screen?
Yes, you're good.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, I've found about 90 plus, I'm pretty sure it's close to 100 right now, birds in the post-fire forests. And that includes several of the birds, you know, that have been mentioned here. And I was in particular loving those osprey drawings. Thank you so much. And this is, you know, quails are very much dependent on the snag forest as well. This is definitely right after Annandale State Park burned. But I also want to share, you know, other birds. This is Western wood pewee and that bright flame orange little nugget sort of underneath the Western wood pewee adult is a little chick, wide open beak, waiting for the meal. So as you can see, over 90 species of birds. And of course, my focus has been Sierra Nevada, but also the coastal ranges and of course, Sonoma County, which is where I live. And the same story is true over and over. But I kind of want to focus a little bit on the black-backed woodpecker. And Ryan, you might know this, the Mono Lake bird Chautauqua every year features sort of a snag walk, or there's a couple of snag walks that I take people on. I've been doing Mono Lake bird Chautauqua for about, I guess it's been 7 years. And this black-backed woodpecker is one of the rare snag forest species. Snags being, what is a snag? Some people call them stag trees. These are burnt trees that turn, you know, sort of they burn during the fire. The outer crust of the tree gets toasted charcoal, and you know the tree gets converted into a standing dead tree. And it's much easier for a bird like the black-backed woodpecker to hunt. In this case, it's hunting for wood-boring beetle larvae, and that white being in its beak is a wood-boring beetle larva. I'm just going to read a poem quickly that is about the life in the Sierra after fires. Not long after lightning has rushed down the electric staircase of its own making, not long after fires 5 stories tall have swept up canyon, a new season the size of pearls begins. Silence is spreading like hands to touch the heads of seedlings and fiddlehead nudging out by the hundreds through ceiling of soil and ashy debris. And that's, you know, right below there in the lower part of the slide, you can see fir and actually cedar seedlings coming right up out of the ground in the backdrop of the the snag right there. This is another close-up of the black-backed woodpecker. And you know, it's not a common bird. And Cornell actually, Cornell Birds had currently done sort of a study, or publicized a study that was done on black-backed woodpeckers in burned forest, because as you can see from that charcoal back, they're very much adapted to charcoal forests, because they blend in and they stick out like a sore thumb if they're not in the charcoal forests. And this is where they raise their young, and you can see this is a little chick in a very charcoaled snag, and a chick is out begging for food, but it's not able to fly yet. The problem is that, of course, we're seeing, like so many systems, just like the salt lakes, we're seeing sort of something called salvage logging, which is a selective removal of dead trees, which means it's a selective removal of bird nests, and, you know, by the thousands. I think there's some 200,000 acre project and another 80,000 project. I mean, in just one after another in these areas that are burned, assuming, I think it's mostly about like the management catching up with the science. It's just assuming that these are not as valued. And in fact, the Cornell study recently suggested that, you know, you don't really have to, you know, basically these birds do nest in snag trees that are toasted, but they nest really close to live trees. What I found is the opposite. They nest right in the middle of those very same snag forests that are selectively, you know, sort of logged right after fire. So it's just sort of one of those, you know, let's have a conversation between the scientists and the managers kind of moments. And we're hoping, a lot of folks are hoping that, you know, we can get the protections that these little ones need, especially, you know, there's actually, by the way, indigo buntings were mentioned in the earlier presentation, and indigo buntings are another bird that I've actually seen in a burned forest. So here's a black-backed dad. This is the male parent coming over to feed the chick in the same nest. And in this case, in this nest, I documented this for about, you know, I'd go in typically about 4 in the morning when it's dark, when the birds are really quiet, and stay until the light is good enough for me to do the camera work to see how the feeding activity is going. And, you know, staying about 100 feet away so they're not feeling threatened. This is a close-up that I have with my camera. I got my footage with my camera just to see how frequently the feeding is happening. Well, the female parent in this case did not come here, but you know, so I never did see her, which possibly meant that she was already taken out by a predator, which is one of the things that's happening where the snag forests are opened up. And of course, these birds are very territorial, and they get very visible, especially very antsy during the nesting season if a predator is close by. So it's possible that because I never saw her, that she was already taken out by a predator. And as you can see, which on that subject, this is a male drumming a tree on his nest tree, and you can see how visible he is. You know, that black, it is a blackened snag. There's some black on one side, but this is a lodgepole pine snag, and gosh, you know, he's, you know, it's very easy for this male to be sighted. He's black on gold basically. And sure enough, this nest did fail. So that's one of the reasons why the community is really, really anxious to save these snag forests post-fire from logging. And the other reason, of course, is those little baby trees you saw that do get wrecked with those logging operations. Another bird is the white-headed woodpecker, and that's a male white-headed woodpecker in Yosemite. It's, again, an intact snag forest, and it's a little less it forages a little less deeply into the bark. You won't find those big bugs in its beak, but it has more bark beetles. Smaller bark beetles is what it forages for. And northern flicker, kind of similar. And northern flicker is another woodpecker. I've been working with woodpeckers so much that that actually likes to take out ants a lot. And this is a little pygmy nuthatch. Also, you can see this. It's in the burn. It's in a burned forest, and the little chick is inside that cavity there. Actually, that chick is ready to graduate. It was almost flying inside. It was like flapping its wings inside the cavity. And bluebirds are secondary cavity nesters, which it's fascinating. They'll seek out any old woodpecker nest and crack in the tree that, or in a snag that woodpeckers do build extra cavities, and some of them are not used. So in comes these secondary cavity nesters, like this is a western bluebird and mountain bluebird, very territorial male mountain bluebird here. So they are all secondary cavity nesters. They'll go into these sort of used cavities and set up home for the chicks. So and I just wanted to end with a mono. This is a mono. Actually, I think this is pretty much the last slide. Mono Lake. Green-tailed towhee, also in a very freshly burned aspen forest, where the beautiful young aspens were growing, and there was so much cover. The towhees are in the low vegetation that's coming right up after the fire, and this one had a nest. So, oh yeah, just want to finish up with Western tanager. There's just so much to share, but I want to be careful because I can always work with more slides later on with the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've been wanting to know what are the birds that repopulate after a burn, and there it is, a beautiful exposition of incredible diversity. I knew about the woodpeckers, but not the other species. I know you've made a couple of really wonderful films on this theme. Is there some way to find out when those will be shown?
Oh, you're sure. There's Green Planet Films has the first one I did, and I have to confess, my brother-in-law and my family also say this is documentation, not film. I come from a family of very, very particular filmmakers, so that first documentation was literally chasing people in the field with a camera, up hills, down hills, into areas with the nests or without. And so it's a half-hour film called Searching for the Gold Spot. Green Planet Films took it, probably because it's just not really common to see birds nesting in, especially northern goshawk, great gray owl, and spotted owl, which are much more rare raptor birds. So that's probably the reason why they took it. So that has it. I'll send the link for these films, and I'll put that in the chat.
Great. I'm sure people will appreciate knowing how to get a hold of more information from you. Okay, and I'm going to move on to Arthur now, our last presenter. And Arthur is choosing to share with us via telephone, although Christina is going to put up an image that he offered to us. Little bio, Arthur Furstenberg is an expert on the subject of electromagnetic radiation and the health of biological life on the planet. He is the founder of the Cellular Phone Task Force, where he posts in their newsletter on global EMR, electromagnetic radiation, impacts on birds. In addition to being an activist and a writer, he's also, sorry, I didn't say that properly. He is an author as well, and has created 2 books, Microwaving Our Planet, The Environmental Impact of the Wireless Revolution, and also The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life, published by Chelsea Green Press, among other writings. And looking at his website, I went, oh my word, he has created a worldwide network of folks who are questioning and resisting this technology. It's really impressive. So I hope he'll address that. All right, Arthur, what would you like to share?
Yes, and I want to thank Maya for bringing up what is happening to our forests, because that's another area of my involvement and my expertise. The United States Forest Service, this is not the topic of my talk, but the U.S. Forest Service is not only logging and permitting logging right after fire, they're logging before fires. They are inviting logging companies, timber companies, to come into national forests and log them. And then they're doing prescribed birds, and they're doing this every 5 to 10 years throughout the country. And they have taught forest managers all over the world to do the same thing, and they're destroying the world's forest ecosystems. I could talk extensively about that, but that's not the topic that I prepared today. So let me go into what I'm going to talk about. Let me give you some background. There are only two fundamental forces in the universe outside of atomic nuclei. They are gravity and electricity. Gravity holds the universe together. Electricity makes it alive. Electricity is the life force, and we human beings are messing with it big time. In the 1840s, we began to string millions of miles of telegraph wires around the world. In 1896, we began to liberate the messages from the confines of those wires, and we began to broadcast them through the air in the form of radio waves. And we pretended that except for their usefulness, the radio waves did not exist. They had no effect on the environment, no effect on biology. And today we pretend that we can bombard our bodies and our brains with radio waves that are 100 billion times as strong as the radio waves that we evolved with on this earth. And we pretend that it won't affect us. And we pretend that we can bombard the animals and the birds around us and even put tracking devices on them and blast them at point-blank range with this radiation, and we pretend that it won't affect them. Wireless means radiation. Every cell phone, every wireless computer, every wireless device emits powerful radiation that travels as far as you can see and irradiates everyone and everything on its way. The wireless revolution that came to the U.S. in 1996 was the worst mistake our nation has ever made. It has caused the pandemics of diabetes, heart disease, and cancer that we suffer from today. It is causing the extermination of all species of birds all around the country and all around the world. Radio waves, also called radio frequency radiation, is traveling electromagnetic fields. And when an electromagnetic field encounters an electric current, it interferes with that current. In our bodies, it interferes with the currents in our nervous system, our brain, our heart, and in every cell. And inside the mitochondria of every cell are tiny electric currents that transport electrons generated by the digestion of the food we eat to the oxygen we breathe. Therefore, this radiation slows metabolism. And if we are a small flying creature like a bird that has a very high metabolism, that creature can no longer fly, and it is killed and driven to extinction. In the late 1960s, a team of scientists working for the National Research Council of Canada proved that bird feathers make excellent receiving areas for radio waves. They expose young chickens, pigeons, seagulls to RF radiation at about the intensity that everyone in the world is exposing their brains to today. The birds usually collapsed to the floor of their cages in 5 to 20 seconds. Even if only their tail feathers were exposed, they would scream, defecate, and try to escape, but not if they were first defeathered. Chickens that had been plucked showed no reaction to the radiation until about the 12th day, when their regrowing feathers were about 1 centimeter long. The researchers then measured radiation patterns around bird feathers and proved that feathers are antennas that receive and amplify RF radiation from the environment. In the late 1990s, Spanish wildlife biologist Alfonso Belmori in Valladolid studied birds in an urban park named Campo Grande. Half the park's 14 resident bird species either seriously declined or vanished completely within a 2-year period after cell phone antennas were installed. There were 40 times as many sparrows in parks with little radiation compared to parks that had cell towers. Storks that built nests near a cell tower hatched few or no baby storks. In Greece, Ioannis Magras and Thomas Zenos at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki exposed hundreds of quail eggs in an incubator to the types of radiation we are all exposed today in our cities from radio towers and cell towers. When they exposed the eggs for an hour a day for 3 days, 1/5 of the embryos died. When they exposed them continuously for 3 days, 65% of the embryos died. When they exposed them between the 3rd and 10th day of incubation, 14% of the embryos died. 14% of the chicks that hatched died soon after birth. Half the surviving chicks were developmentally retarded, and some had birth defects. There are thousands, tens of thousands of studies on the similar to these, not just on birds, but on frogs and on all sorts of other creatures, on human beings, on trees, on plants. Somehow the public is not aware, and this is one of the things that we are trying to do, is create the awareness. In Hawaii, on the island of Maui, a tiny endangered parrot-like bird called the kiwikiu has retreated to a small nature reserve just below the ridge of the Haleakala volcano. Only about 150 of the birds are left. They have taken refuge there because they are sheltered by the ridge of the volcano from an antenna farm that has 20 communication towers and 159 antennas that irradiate the rest of Maui. But bird conservation organizations pretend that this radiation does not exist, and they are blaming the decline of the kiwikiu on malaria, and they're attempting to save this species by introducing them back elsewhere on Maui and eradicating malaria-carrying mosquitoes. But the areas they want to introduce the birds to are intensely irradiated by that antenna farm. And in their first effort at reintroduction in 2019, they attached radio transmitters to every bird that they released, and every one of those normally long-lived birds died within days of being released, except for 3 birds that managed to peck off their radio transmitters off of their bodies, and those 3 birds are still alive today. In just the last year or two, I sent out newsletters to 200,000 people all over the world, and they respond to what I'm writing about. I wrote about the birds of Maui, and I got responses from all over the world as to what's happening to birds and insects and all other animals where people live. In just the last year or two, this is what I compiled from all of the letters I've gotten from my subscribers. With the installation of 4G and 5G antennas virtually everywhere in the world, and the launching of thousands of communication satellites by SpaceX and now by hundreds of companies and governments all over the world, circling the Earth for universal wireless internet, the Earth is being irradiated to death. Birds are disappearing at an unprecedented rate worldwide. Just in the last few months, I have received heart-rending letters from my subscribers in the U.S., Canada, Panama, England, Scotland, France, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Sweden, Finland, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Austria, Australia, South Africa, the Himalayas, Thailand, and Namibia, reporting the nearly complete disappearance of insects and birds where they live. When insects are wiped out, insectivorous birds starve to death. This happened over the southwestern United States, where I lived a couple of years ago. We had millions of birds falling dead out of the sky because there were no insects to eat. And they were falling dead out of the sky because there were so many of them, because most of the birds that flew down in the migration route along the West Coast were driven inland by the fires that were then happening. So, yeah, we have a conflagration with multiple causes, but I'm trying to bring attention to the radiation aspect, which nobody else seems to be paying attention to, and except as was already noted, I'm part of a worldwide network. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of small, medium, and large organizations all around the world that are trying to bring attention to the radiation from wireless technology. If we want to save our birds, the rest of nature, and all of life on Earth, we must cease the use of cell phones and all other wireless devices. We are running out of time. That's my presentation.
Oof. Well, very, very sobering. Very sobering indeed. We've come to the portion, thank you, Arthur. We're gonna have to let that sink in. We've come to the period where I'm inviting the panelists to address each other with questions or comments or observations that they'd like to discuss. And if you need a one of the questions that I think the audience might be interested in is how can artists most effectively approach scientists if they want to try to do a work that bridges both disciplines. Since you all are consummate in this, I have some suggestions about how artists can be effective in offering themselves for collaboration. But if you have other things that are really surged up, please just go for it.
Actually, I wanted to ask Jane about it seems like you find really interesting themes that are super scientifically based, and how you find the scientists or how you do your research to do your art and combine those those like prescient topics into what you're working on.
Yeah, thank you for
Jane, before you start, just if somebody seems to be unmuted, not that YouTube, but somebody else. So could you all check and make sure you're unmuted? There's some interference. Thank you.
I hear that feedback too. Yeah. That's a great question, Ryan. I do a lot of cold emailing to scientists as well as relying on just the good grace of my existing network to offer connections where they feel like they're appropriate. And then of course, like my favorite way to work is to collaborate directly with organizations to create stories and works that will be directly supportive of that. But it honestly has just been a slow build of networking. You know, I graduated from my science illustration program back in 2010. And so since then, and then of course my art degree even way before that. And I think just over time, building those relationships, a lot of my projects, you know, I kind of show you finished works in these sort of slideshow presentations. But, you know, for example, the Wall of Birds, that was a 2.5-year project of me making the art. It was probably more like a 4-year project when it actually came to developing the research and connecting and putting everything in place, raising the money. All of my projects are minimum like a year out and requires a lot of organization on that front. I think there's a question. Oh, so Shelley Firth asked me a direct question. Where did I study science illustration? CSUMB, the California State University of Monterey Bay. They kind of have the program, the one and only program in the country that offers science illustration as a full year.
Say that again. What's it called?
California State University, Monterey Bay.
Okay,
CSUMB. And it's a year-long postgraduate program. It's a certificate, so it's part of their extension program, and it's an amazing, definitely worth it boot camp of a year of learning all things science illustration. Now, other places, when I went to the Rhode Island School of Design, they did not have any scientific illustration offered in their illustration department or anything, and that has started to change because now they do offer science illustration as electives and courses through the illustration department. Their nature lab is extraordinary. When I was there, it was looked like a little bit of a wasteland, but they have renovated it. So these topics, and weed has been around forever. So I feel like, artists have been making art about their environment forever. It's just, I think now more than ever becoming abundantly clear to everyone how critical and how embedded we are on our understanding of nature. So I think it's just kind of picking up more and more speed, which is awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I take classes at Berkeley City College. That's how I kind of found out about weed, because of some people. Anyway, and there was a woman in my class that was doing medical illustration.
Nice.
Anyway, so that's why I was sort of, or she was going to do that. So that's, but I like your science, whatever. Thanks.
Yeah, medical illustration, there's lots of programs for that, and it's really extensive. You basically need a pre-med degree in order to get into any of those programs. Like Johns Hopkins has an extraordinary medical illustration program.
But I'll go for the 1-year program or whatever.
Yeah, right. Right.
So Deanna has a question for Ryan. Do you know of any other possible opportunities for artists to work with scientists to create nesting habitat?
Thanks for the question, Deanna. So yeah, I feel like these situations can be pretty specific, and I don't have, a bag full of great, cool ideas for different applications. But one other example I can give is, so in that process with the ceramic nests, we also worked with more like designer type artists, and we worked with a group called Rebar, which was in the Bay Area at the time, and a group called More Lab. Matthew Passmore was one of the artists, and we built basically like a sculpture on Año Nuevo Island too, that is a sea lion exclusion fence essentially around a small part of the island where the auklet nesting density is highest, and it's this amazing sculpture that we call the Habitat Ridge. It's built out of eucalyptus logs and designed to hold itself up and not let the sea lions over it, while also blend into the island and be safe for the wildlife and be biodegradable. It doesn't have any metal in it. It's just made out of wood. So I don't have a picture of that ready, unfortunately, but that's one example. And, I think that there's probably plenty of other examples out there. And one thing that I was going to say in response to how, with an artist approaches a scientist, how do you proceed, is just, there's a lot of thinking outside the box that has to happen. And I think that the real catalyst is having a scientist who's open to working with artists, and having an artist who's open to working with scientists, and finding common ground. And there's this ceramic nest application is kind of a uniquely productive for the actual wildlife one, because they can live in it. But there's other applications like building a sculpture or doing art that the wildlife, even if it's not the critical habitat for the wildlife, they can still use it or benefit from it, or it complements their habitat or something else like that. Yeah, I wish I had more examples, but I would say just keep your ears open. I see the hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on that. That's such great advice, Ryan. It honestly, it takes that. It's like the willing party. So it's about cold calling, about putting the ask out there. If you have an idea, bring it to people, and you will inevitably find somebody who gets it. That's kind of the term I always use. I'm like, oh, these guys get it. And then what needs to then happen, both of you guys need to be determined and bring, just the reality to life. And that takes a lot of work. But I think that when you find the right partnership, it becomes really exciting. And even if it's 6 months of getting, lifting your project off the ground, finding the money to do it, blah, 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 checking off all those boxes. It's a really beautiful way to work with science organizations, because that's really kind of all it boils down to, is the willingness and having the resources. Anyway, that's been I've always been told by people, like fundraisers. They're like, if raising the money is all you need to do, that's the last problem. Like that's the easiest problem to solve, which sounds crazy, but I believe in that process. I trust the process now.
I see your hand too, Maya.
Yeah, I have also a question for Jen. I it is so staggering to see the biodiversity of snag forests, and I guess I'm going to frame a question before I ask it. Interestingly, my worldview is that I think because there's such a patchwork quilt after fire, it's never like uniformly what you see in the news. It's never just all this black and landscape. There's a patch, and then there's a patch of green, and there's a patch of mixed half and half, etc. Across the landscape. And so the bird life, and actually I didn't show any of the mammals. I started doing remote camera work, and it's primarily mammals. They too are absolutely using every little nook and cranny and niche. And of course, snags offer the housing complexes of the wild. I just haven't seen enough artwork done on this subject. And I just, it's just, we have a thirst for it. And primarily because, of course, Arthur seconded this. And I'm sure some of you have seen, especially if you're up in Mono Lake, Ryan. It is just the most thriving, incredible, biodiverse forest there is. But we really do have a lack of that interface between the arts and the sciences on that. And I'm craving for some opportunity to have a sort of a a writing, an interface between the writing world and the art world on that, because there's a thirst for knowledge whenever I show these slides. And of course the footage, with the little guy going nuts and then being fed and they're just elated, and there's just, you just grab people. They're like, how can they be possibly logging these forests? And it's this huge misunderstanding. So to the point where, sometimes they're coming close to a nest and somebody's found it. Hey, stop, just wait for these little chicks to get out of there before you do this. So it's pretty dramatic. So I just think there's a huge need, and I'm just wondering out aloud, really, to you all, but to you in particular, Jane, if you seek some kind of opportunity for that.
I see an incredible opportunity for that. In fact, as you were describing this, I have a friend whom I'd like to connect you to, who has an idea that she's trying to get off the ground that I think would in fact be a perfect fit for this. And I don't want to reveal too much about this, but she's a phenomenal artist, and I'm sure many of you will recognize her name when I say it. But I'd love to introduce you to an artist named Tiffany Bozick, who's working on a really neat idea that I think could do exactly what you need art and science to do together, to get people interested out there and excited about this topic. So I'd love to connect with you after this to share this project with you.
I think Ruth Wallen has her hand up.
Hey, Christina may have had her hand up before me, but I trust there's time for both of us. So I guess I'll just go. And Christina, we also need to talk sometime, because I just wrote an article that included your work and we've never met. But anyway, right now I wanted to really connect with Maya, because I wanted to say that I've been doing work mostly in Southern California, but also in Colorado, New Mexico, walking with dying trees from multiple causes, fire, bark beetles, drought, the whole whatever. And one of the things that I realized was not even thinking about the wildlife that grows after fire, but that so often, like when trees decompose, they replenish the soil. And for instance, in New Mexico, you can look at the pinyon pines and really think of them as, someone told me this, ecologist, as laying themselves down for the next generation, because they hold water and nutrients. And that's where you find the baby pinyons. So I write and I make art. So I really like to talk to you, because I wanted to make this more of a focus. And I also wanted to ask you, because I would like to know what efforts are happening in the Southern Sierras to discourage what they call salvage logging, because I don't feel like they're taking into consideration the wildlife, as you said, or the building of the soils.
Yeah, so salvage logging, unfortunately, it's being fought one project at a time, and it's a law that's in place. It's called officially a categorical exclusion. So as soon as a fire burns through, the idea that it is a wasteland allows for something called a CE, a categorical exclusion, which means that no one can fight it unless there's some threatened endangered species. Like what I was saying about those woodpeckers, there was a blackback family and the little chicks were right there. And there was so 2 blackback families were found and the loggers were coming really close. And someone found them by some chance, say, hey, by the way, you got in that tree, are you really going to take it down? And the news, and that's why it's, the 2 nests got saved. But the fact is exactly what you're saying. That snag is going to be used because of the bugs. So that's the food source when they even get out of the nest. So if those are gone, then their food source is gone. Plus when they collapse. And I just interviewed Herb Hammond up. He was a Canadian forester who quit Canadian Forest Service a couple of years ago with a big announcement.
Wait, can you say his name slower?
Herb, H-E-R-B, Herb Hammond.
Okay, thanks.
Very famous now for various reasons. But he was talking about exactly what you said, is when the trees fall and that water trap that they have, they save all the water in that shade. And that there's profiles of giant sequoias growing in after the 2020 Castle Fire and KNP complex fires. You can see the little baby giant sequoias growing in right in the shadow of the fallen snags and even the standing snags that have this sort of basal area of shelter and moisture retention. So it's just fascinating to see the layers of life. I would say, I think about it as concentric circles coming back, including now the blackback woodpeckers. It's been, 1 or 2 years post-fire, you'll see the blackbacks, but you'll also see spotted owls. Northern California spotted owls in the south, and the sequoia. I've actually found a fissure, and it was sadly, it was not footage. It was, unfortunately, I put a still camera there, but a fissure with a Cooper's hawk's head. It was either Cooper or Sharpie head in her mouth. She had grabbed the hawk. I mean, this is hunting ground for these meso carnivores and even larger carnivores. So it's great, incredible, rich country. And it's, as you said, every layer of life and every layer of death is giving way to a new layer. So it's absolutely fantastic that this master recycling process that's happening out there in the wild.
Yeah, if there's any way to connect around this, I mean, for instance, Save the Redwoods in Sierra Crest, like, did logging, and they even used Roundup. And I have all these photos elsewhere after the fire, both the fires that you mentioned, that show the sequoias seedlings coming back and growing through, like in Freeman Creek, you can see them growing through the ceanothus. And the ceanothus actually provides shade. So it's like this whole misunderstanding. But I am curious, what if I can ask one other quick question, then I know other people have questions, that Arthur mentioned about logging before fire. And there is also a belief, Chad Hansen criticizes it, but other artists like Helena Newton Harrison, who most of the people on this call probably know. I mean, Newton did a project supporting some thinning before fires to help decrease severity. And I'm curious what your feeling is about that.
So I visited, the Dixie Fire was the 1 million acre fire. It was one of the biggest.
Right.
And of course, the Mendocino Complex Fire was, I think, next biggest. I can't remember the acreage on that. But I visited a lot of these fires. And what I'm finding time after time is, if you see the thinning formula, where forest thinning results in the removal of really small trees, it's a sincere effort, basically. They're trying to take out what they call ladder fuels, right? those areas, limited as they are, there's a possibility that works. And it's roadside, for roadside safety, you name it. But for the most part, thinning, which is one word, it's like saying I'm eating. I could be eating junk food. I could be eating salad, right? Thinning has 1,000 meanings. And for the most part, they're taking the largest trees. I mean, and wherever, and I very carefully documented, because there's someone from Los Padres Forest Watch called Bryant Baker, and he's a GIS specialist, mapping how fast these fires are moving through thinned landscapes. And they're moving really fast because they're supposed to slow down, lie down, and creep along the ground. They're not. And so once he's done with a map effort, I try as fast as I can, when time permits, to go into that fire area to see what those thinned areas look like. They are toasted, because for the most part, they're taking out the largest, most fire resistant trees. There are some sincere efforts, but just really do that trimming kind of a thing, where you're trying to leave in most of the big trees. But for the most part, I'm not seeing that on the ground.
This is Arthur. Could I say a few things about this?
Yeah, sure.
So we
Yeah,
we have till 5:30 and got it. So go ahead, and then Christina come in.
Thinning a forest, no matter how you do it, opens up the canopy, lets in sunlight, heats up the forest, dries out the forest, lets the wind blow through, so if a fire does start, it becomes a conflagration. Thinning is a nightmare for forests. It is done to make it easier to log, and thinning the trees, even if you log small and large trees, it's thin, it's for wood, it's for paper, it's for anything else. They want to open up the forest to make it easier to prospect for gas, oil, and minerals. They want to make it easier to have geothermal. It's like all of these commercial interests want entry to the forest, particularly the logging industry. This is not done for the health of the forest. The propaganda of the Forest Service is that trees are fire hazards, and the more of them, the more less fire resistant the forest is. The opposite. Trees are up to 15% or more water, and it's difficult to burn live trees. So that's my 2 cents about this. I'm in agreement with Chad Hansen and people like that.
Yes.
Maybe we can get to the next question. Was that Christina?
Yeah, I just want to say I love the attention you're drawing to this, and yeah, leaving the big trees is most important, because we now know that they're mother trees and that they actually support all the smaller trees around them, and taking them out is absolute insanity. The biggest trees are the most important trees to be left. And Arthur, I really wanted to just ask you if you have any ideas how artists can help get the word out about just the dangers of EMR for life on the planet.
Well, we're organizing an international working group called Global Radiation Emergency, and we would welcome the participation of you artists. We don't have any artists among us.
And what do you imagine artists doing? How could they be helpful?
I haven't thought about it, but art is a necessary component of any marketing campaign, for any publicity campaign. It helps get the message out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use?
I have not thought about it. I don't know off the top of my head what you would draw. Maybe you have ideas or could come up with them.
Well, the piece I have in the show was specifically about the research about birds' feathers being antenna that direct the.
There we go.
Yeah. My other question for you is, I'm very concerned about the fact that these devices are attached to animals that are scarce and endangered, because we want to know where they are and we want to track them, and we're supposedly trying to help them. But if these transmitters that we attach to their bodies are actually harmful to them, that's a big concern. And
they are killing them. Yes, we used to attach leg bands that we could identify from a distance with binoculars. That's the way that it should still be done.
Uh-huh. So is there really clear, are there comparative studies that show that animals or birds that have had transmitters on them are more likely to?
I have reviews of studies,
Mhm.
reviews of hundreds of studies. Yes, they are out there. They're not being paid attention to.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you.
I think we could probably keep going for another couple of hours easily.
Well, if there are more questions, we could keep going for a few more minutes. People are good.
I wanted to be sensitive to Mary's concerns about catalog announcements and a couple of other bits of business.
All right, well, I guess, is that the end of the,
Not necessarily. If you feel like we need to close, then that's what
I
we'll do.
think what we'll do is close officially and stop the recording at 5:30, and then people are welcome to stay. How about that? That way the panelists, if they need to go, they can leave. I just wanted to show everybody the printed catalog of the exhibit, and it's for sale for $12. It has a page for each artist and their statement. So one of the interns, two of the interns at San Bernardino State University made this for us. So we're very thrilled to have it. And the link is on the website, and I'll also put it in the chat. And if you like this presentation and you feel in any way interested in contributing, you can go to the Weed website and make a donation. We'd appreciate it for more programming. And thank you all panelists. You did an incredible job. I'll give it back to Lauren.
Mary, if people want to listen to the recording, where can they find it when it's
The
posted?
recording will be posted in the next couple of days, probably by Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest, on our Weed website, weedartist.org.
So for people that weren't able,
It will be under probably events. We have our series of art and activism, art and education, art and science, and I'm not sure where we're going to post it, but it'll be somewhere there.
and if participants are interested in getting in touch with the panelists, might that be possible?
Yes, if participants are interested, why don't you send your emails to info@weedartist.org and we'll forward them to the panelists. How about that?
That way they have more control over something that's just simply posted in the chat. I'm so grateful to the panelists for all the astounding work that you shared with us this evening. And I'm going to continue binging on your websites.
So glad to know everybody here now. Thank you. It's great to speak with you today.
Well, I wish everybody the very best with your projects, and I hope you keep us posted.
Great. So what we'll do is just thank you all. We'll stop the recording and then we can continue with whoever would like for more conversation. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice evening, everybody.